Hey again guys, let's get started right away. This video will expand the concept put forward in the first part. And first of all, I want you to remind you guys that whenever the term sovereign currency appears in this series, it will refer exclusively to currencies that are A. Issued by a state's central fiscal authority, hence they're sovereign. B. They're non-redeemable for gold or for anything else upon citizens' request. It means that citizens cannot take their money to a bank and demand to be given instead a fixed amount of gold or any other valuable thing. Hence, they're non-convertible. And C. They're exchangeable for foreign money at an exchange rate decided by the markets and by other factors. It means that the government does not promise to exchange its unit of its sovereign currency for a fixed amount of any other foreign currency. Hence, they're floating. Examples of sovereign currencies are the American dollar, the yen, the British pound, Turkish lira, and formerly the German mark, French franc, Italian liras, and other EU currencies that were all sovereign, but that were supplanted by the euro that is not a sovereign currency, as I already explained in part 1. Before continuing, it is essential for you guys to understand the difference between good deficits and bad deficits. In fact, what the elite's ploy was and still is targeting are the good deficits, for the reason explained in part 1 of this series. When it comes to bad deficits, well, their attitude is profoundly hypocritical, as you will understand later on. But first, let's fully clarify the difference between the two sets of deficits. Modern money theory will call a good deficit the type of government expenditure that is targeted at creating full employment, full welfare, full education, better infrastructure, and growing productivity. This engenders a virtuous cycle that will not only make the non-government sector better off, but will end up largely paying for itself. Yes, because it would trigger a decrease of state social expenditure for unemployment benefits, for the underemployed, for the social ills of unemployment such as crime or alcoholism, all of this going towards reducing the deficit. A good deficit would also trigger an increase in government income through higher tax revenues even without increasing the tax rate. In fact, a wealthier non-government sector will earn more income and thus pay more money into the state's coffer, and again, this will reduce the deficit. But that's not the end of it. Good deficit will also result in more things being produced at home and so less need to import them, improving the current account deficit of the state. They will also make the country more efficient and more attractive for investors, so there will be foreign money getting into the country. Finally, good deficit will also keep inflation in check because of all the extra production that will match the increase in the monetary mass going around. On the contrary, bad deficits are disastrous. They are very often the paradoxical result of the neoclassical, neo-mercantile, and neoliberal hysteria to reduce deficits. In fact, when the state is forced by that hysteria to slash good deficit, it will immediately make all the non-government sector poorer. This will make it fall into a vicious circle of economic deflation, meaning less consumption, so less sales for firms, and so workers will be fired. There will be an increase in the social expenditure described earlier and a decrease of states' income through falling tax revenues and falling foreign investments. Many other economic perils like the loss of market confidence in the state will ensue. All of this will obviously make the deficit worse and wreck the country in the long run. Mind you, even though on the face of it, the neoclassical, neo-mercantile, and neoliberal elites will revile all government deficits, they hypocritically ignore and hide from us the glaring fact that the only pernicious deficit is the one which directly derives from their sacred economic prescriptions. As I was saying, social structures and nations that benefited from some form of good deficit spending briefly, albeit incompletely, came into existence in some Western nations in the 70s, to the horror of the elites. In fact, the decade that followed the 68 progressive mass movements in the US and in Europe saw the ideals born of the Enlightenment era reach their apex. They looked unstoppable in the midst of an ever-growing political consensus. It became apparent to the elites that democratic states were approaching the day when they could have gained the upper hand in the control of the world's wealth. This could not be allowed to happen. Hence the massive planning I mentioned earlier. Their decision was drastic. Their 4 goals crystal clear. 1. The sovereign monetary power of the states had to be destroyed together with their possibility to use it in large part for socially oriented, citizens empowering expenditures. Destroy good deficit spending. 2. The state's legislative sovereignty had to be equally curtailed lest they legislate to cement that enlightened possibility to unassailable laws. 3. Citizens had to be sidelined and made useless so they never truly realized the potentials of their sovereign states. And 4. Finally, from the ashes of entire nation wrecked by the success of their ploy, the elites wish to extol not just the control of the largest slice of the world's wealth, but super profit in finance and exports. In other words, Our goose that laid the golden eggs had to be all but destroyed. So it was. The dawn of the 1990s presented the neoclassical, neo-mercantile, and neoliberal masterminds with an opening of historical proportions. Just as they were getting ready for their rush to final victory, the Soviet Empire collapsed. To understand what we're getting at, let's recap the neo-mercantile side of this ploy. The neo-mercantilists fought to stop good deficit spending, thus creating unemployment and permanent economic precariousness, thus being able to justify lowering wages and the consequent erosions of workers' rights. They hoped to be finally blessed with a reserve army of the unemployed and underemployed that would enable the big corporation to hire cheapen Western labor and to compete on the international export markets. This is what the neo-mercantilists wanted and were slowly getting through the machinations of their ploy. But then, when the Soviet Empire came to an end, the doors of Eastern Europe were flung open to the free market hawks, and behind them lay masses of miserable human beings ready to work for pennies, together with the entire economies to be picked clean. The neo-mercantilists of Europe had never dreamt of anything like it. Of course, we're not claiming that the communist dictatorship were commendable affairs, but the exploitation of those people following the demise of communism has been morally revolting. I'm gonna end this part here because I feel there was a lot of information already and I want to let you process it while I work for the next part. Remember to use adblock, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe. Bye bye guys.